Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming today. I'd like to introduce one of Linda's very good friends and comrades for over 25 years, Liz Roberts.
And I would like to introduce Christine Keeling, who was Linda's dear, dear cousin and buddy extraordinaire, and even coworker, but really a soulmate cousin.
Okay. All right. We like to acknowledge that we gather as guests on traditional and unceded territory of the Munsee Lenape people, the original stewards of this land from which most were removed unjustly. It is important to acknowledge the settler colonial genocide which still today continues to be perpetrated against this community, and the resilience of the Lenape who continue to resist erasure. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and future. We thank the people whose land we gather and are mindful this stolen native land was built upon the labor of enslaved Africans. Let us thank Native Americans and African Americans for sharing their cultures and practices, despite the havoc European settlers wreaked on their societies. Let us make the effort to understand societies before European contact and how all impacted live today. Let us be mindful of the ongoing impacts of colonization and slavery. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to make right with all of our relations. Let us commit to ending injustice and restoring the balance to Mother Earth.
I'd like to welcome to the podium Jeremiah, who's going to share some of his music with us. That's Jeremy Hosea, and he actually is an old comrade of Linda's who was at the Student Liberation Action movement in Hunter College around the time that several of us met Linda.
It's an honor to be here. And actually my son Marcus right here, he went to his swimming class earlier, and he said he was scared to go in the pool. And I said, it's okay to be scared, and you just have to summon your courage. And I told him, I'm gonna sing later, and I'm scared about that. Because, I was performing regularly, and then all this stuff happened, and, now I'm getting back on the horse, so to speak. But it's an honor to be here. And I want to share with you an a cappella to start out with, which was the theme song of a show some of you may be familiar with, Earth Watch, hosted by my late friend, the great Robert Knight, who was also a great activist and journalist. And he had this wonderful theme song for his show, which was written by Stevie Wonder, I believe, and it's called The Bell for Freedom. So please support me with your spirit as I perform The Bell for Freedom. The bell for freedom still rings. The bell for freedom still rings. Sorrow to me, brother, does it bring to know the bell for freedom still must ring. The hammer for justice still pounds. The hammer for justice still pounds. Heavy is the beating sound of the hammer for justice that still pounds. When will the world stop and listen? When will we all stop and see? When will we feel what we've been missing? That the man on the moon must have found, that he looks upon us with a frown, because millions of babies still starve. Millions of babies still starve. We can't have the biggest heart if millions of babies still starve. The innocent ones still die. The innocent ones still die. We don't value life too high if the innocent ones still die. When will the world stop and listen? When will we all stop and see? When will we feel what we've been missing? That the man on the moon must have found that he looks upon us with a frown. But as long as there's life, there's still a day. And as long as there's light, there's still a day. I know we can find our way. For as long as there's life, there's still a day. Thank you. That was the bell for freedom. And now I'm gonna do I'm a bass guitarist, and I wrote something last night when I put the kids to bed. I just create something every night. And last night I created something. It's actually kind of weird. It's kind of happy and sad, and it's kind of weird, so I hope it's not too weird for you guys. But I'm gonna improvise over it for about 2 minutes in the key of F minor. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it. This is for Linda. Thank you. Hope you guys enjoyed that. It was sincere. And yeah, I haven't seen Linda in years, and you know, it was an honor to meet her through a very good friend of mine, Asif Ullah, and you know, we're all connected, and you know, it's an honor to be here. I didn't get a chance to know her as well as I would have liked to, honestly, and you know, that's the thing that we all have to remember, is that this whole experience is a transitory one. So, you know, we have to love each other fully while we're here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah. It was beautiful. So I'm going to read The Charge of the Goddess, which I thank Jean Stroll for pulling for today. It's a traditional, and I actually added back a couple of pieces from the longer iteration of it. So I hope you know it comes from love, Jean. So listen to the words of the great mother, who is called by many names. Whenever ye have need of anything, assemble and adore the spirit of me. I will teach things that are yet unknown. And you shall be free from slavery, and you shall be free in your rights. You shall sing and dance, feast, make music, and love, all in my praise. For mine is the ecstasy of the Spirit and joy on earth. For my law is love unto all beings. Keep pure your highest ideals. Strive ever towards it. Let naught stop you or turn you aside. For mine is the cup of the wine of life. I am the goddess who gives joy to the heart. Upon earth, I give the knowledge of the Spirit eternal and beyond death. I give peace and freedom and reunion with those who have gone before. I demand no sacrifice, for I am the mother of all living, and my love is poured out upon the earth. Hear the words of the star goddess, whose body encircles the universe. I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon among the stars, and the mystery of the waters, and the heart's desire, call unto thy soul, arise and come to me. For I am the soul of nature, who gives life to the universe. From me all things proceed, and unto me all things must return. Let my worship be within the heart that rejoices. Therefore, let there be beauty and strength and power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you. And if you seek for me, you will find me within you, or not at all. For behold, I have been with you from the beginning, and I am that which is attained at the end of desire.
Thank you, Liz. So I come from a very large family, a very large, loud, talkative family. And I'm actually one of the loudest, largest people in my family, so it's kind of fitting that I'm up here. Linda was such a gift to us. When you come from a big family, it's easy to get lost. And Linda was one of those people that could see everyone, that remembered your birthday, or your favorite color, or that you were afraid of fish. She loved us unconditionally, and we were very lucky to have her. One of the other things, though, about my cousin, if you knew her, she liked to complain. And one of her biggest pet peeves was that people didn't track their history. For our family, it was more about our family reunion. When she was 18, she was recording her grandmother's memories of being in Florida. But when it came to her movement work, one of the things she found the most frustrating is that people kept reinventing the wheel. She would talk over and over again about how there's no communal memory of what's gone before, which is so important in movement work. There are so many things, if you think about the processes of the United States government and how they affect, infiltrate, and try to manipulate organizations They don't reinvent the wheel. They do it over and over and over again. So one of the important things is learning from our elders, learning from what's come before. And I'm very glad to announce that they have created an internship in Linda's name. The goal of the internship is to help organizations, young and small, old and new, create an organizational memory. So that way you can document what happened, because the revolutionaries of today are the history makers of tomorrow. With the changes in media, where now you're not reading a letter from Bayard Rustin, you're reading a text from someone from Black Lives Matter, the conversations, how they happen, is a new emerging field, and we really want to encourage young people to get into the field of archival, and especially people of color, because the people who are telling your story makes a big difference on the audience receiving it. So if you see up front, this will be the very first Linda Thurston archival internship. This year, I think we're going to focus on WRL. Their 100th anniversary is coming up. And one of the things that Linda started 10 years ago was archiving, copying, getting information, keeping in touch. But we want to know that it's open to all organizations, because just like, I'm forgetting my speech. Just like pacifism is important, so is anti-racism, so is Christian abolition, so is police reform. So I hope that you can all participate and donate when we start for the internship. Thank you.
I'm very excited about this internship program, so I'm going to write my check today. I will try to hew to my written remarks, which are probably far longer than they should be, but at least you know I won't ramble endlessly. There's an end to these notes. So I'm supposed to talk about Linda's contributions to WRL. I'm going to actually take this off. But she was my treasured friend for 10 years prior to joining WRL staff. So for me, it's going to be a little meandering, but I'm fuzzy about the exact year when we first met, and even the context, because a lot of our work was overlapping. But from the time I became involved in resistance in Brooklyn, she was always near, and I became kind of overwhelmed by her, because she was just brilliant and warm, and my late partner, John Cohen, and I just attached ourselves to her. And we worked together at the New York Free Mumia Coalition, and we went to the political prisoner card writing parties that Resistance in Brooklyn organized, and we worked on the Sparks Fly event for women political prisoners, and she just, so it's hard to say exactly what was the moment, but and 98 was also the first critical resistance conference that she and John and Kai Barrow and many of our comrades attended, and I couldn't, and there was a huge buzz about how amazing and exciting it was, and Kai and Linda and I would talk about how we needed to have an East Coast conference. And this was also the same year that Linda was working at WRL as a consultant to plan the 75th anniversary of WRL's existence, and a big conference and a day of action, the Day Without the Pentagon, that happened in DC, and it included civil disobedience, and it was very complex, and she told stories of navigating the differences in organizational culture, and she would point out how, you know, not everyone wants to sleep on the floor, and so she ensured that there were other housing options, and really with aplomb she coordinated a very successful day and a complicated set of activities, and I think she probably had something to do with making sure there was a discussion about critical resistance and the prison industrial complex at that conference. And she gained a lot of respect from WRL folks and made some friends. I know Joanne was somebody she bonded with pretty well at that time. And so shift a little forward, and same period, but different context. A lot of us were working at the Free Mumia Coalition, and a number of us, including Linda, wanted to do civil disobedience and step up the demands to keep Mumia from being executed and to get a new trial. And so we worked together very closely. There was a subcommittee, and so some of the folks like Jeremiah's comrades from SLAM, and folks from CISPAS, and a number of folks, and Linda, and we worked together tightly, and we did these 2 actions in the span of a year. There was the Liberty Bell in 99, and then a 2000 action at the Supreme Court. And so we got even closer, and along with the folks from Hunter from SLAM, and you're going to hear from Kazembe later, who is involved in SLAM, we just were a nice, tight-knit group, and it was a very hectic period, so periodically I would say, but what about that critical resistance conference? Because I was really hoping to go. I didn't get to go, and I kept nudging, and I felt like, speaking of complaints, I guess you say maybe complaint is the beginning of organizing, right? It's that first step toward action. So eventually she and Kai and I sat down and had our first gathering where we started making phone calls to pull together the first steering committee. And then eventually the conference took place in 2001. And Linda's years of relationship and her knowledge of the work to end prisons, and she just had sort of a moral I don't know, just this incredible presence around, how to envision and how to, the ethos of that kind of work. And she just really led in a really heart-filled and wise way. And so I think we have a lot to note about her guidance in that process. And she had a towering intellect. She was really a powerhouse that, was also able to be quite goofy, and she could laugh at herself, and she could good-naturedly tease some of her friends. I do recall when I picked her up from a procedure, and she said she was hungry, and I whipped out a carrot, and she thought that was hilarious. And to this, she mercilessly teased me. I'm still slightly unclear why, but she was definitely, for all of that seriousness that she carried through her work, she really knew how to play. And that makes the work a lot more doable, and it keeps people. And in the planning of that conference, my partner had a second diagnosis of cancer, and so we pulled back a lot. And then Linda just showed up in unbelievable ways, just as a friend, and was very attentive. And when John passed away, we started to plan to do a documentary about him, and she sat on a board to try to make this a reality, which has yet to be done, but she gave unbelievable guidance and questions that were really helpful, and really, suggested important things that helped to kind of shape the work that was already done, which hopefully will be picked up again. She gave a beautiful, very powerful interview. And so then I moved to her neighborhood, and was grieving at the time, so we got to have a lot of meals and just talk about movement stuff and movement gossip and books and Buddhism. And after I worked at the Brecht Forum for 7 years, I left to go work at WRL. And around that time, they were looking for a fundraiser. And I guess at the time for Linda, things at the funding exchange were starting to come undone. And she ended up going to work at the Brecht for a while. But after a short period, when their finances were worse than they looked, I suggested she come and apply at WRL because there was a position open for an office coordinator. And I knew she was way overqualified, but I didn't want her to stress about rent, and she had struggled a lot with the ageist job market after she had given so much to the left. It was just rotten to see the way that they couldn't, embrace and hire her, as easily. It was just another moment where she was identifying things that we needed to work on the left. And so she joked about following me, and I said, I'm really just following you because I wanted to be near her and I wanted to learn about organizing from her. And her insights and the joy and the kind of the seriousness at once that she held. It just, I needed to be near her to learn from her. And so she really taught through more example than anything else. And she connected that a good organizer is really just a good person, that there's a lot in common, that good people and good organizers have to have love and patience and integrity guiding their actions. And she knew good organizers, like good people, are motivated by compassion and not ego, and that was her. She understood and modeled that good organizers value relationships most, and she did. And she loved people, and her arms were wide open. And she modeled healthy boundaries, and that she didn't tolerate those who caused harm and who didn't show self-awareness. She challenged us to be grown, as she would say, and she spoke out when people did things that were racist or sexist or otherwise disrespectful, and she celebrated people. And she would notice the kindnesses, and she would say that person's mama raised them right. And she was very brave and very honest. And even in the very difficult moments, she was patient and compassionate with people, and she didn't pull any punches when it came to injustice or abuse, or even bad political positions. But she understood people were complicated, and she did, even with problematic folks, she tried to see from their perspectives. And she was kind of like a movement doctor, I always think, kind of, or an organizational doctor. She kind of understood the weaknesses and the challenges and what the fixes, were needed, and maybe where the cases were terminal. And she was timeless, and her spirit was gargantuan. And she had a tremendous capacity for love, and countless became her babies. She cultivated a legion of peace and justice leaders, and this was because she understood she had things to teach and share, but she was never heavy-handed or teacherly. It was her stories and her sense of humor and discussing her own journey, and she always treated young people as she would her age peers. She had complete respect for their experience and their knowledge and their courage to step into political work. And young people adored her for this. She believed in them, and that sometimes is all that folks really need to get going. And as you know, Linda, among many things, was a storyteller, and she taught us all through her stories. I love to hear her movement history or gossip, from the 70s and the early 80s, and the stories of, sectarianism in Boston, and the anti-apartheid struggle, and the vibrancy of her campus organizing, and how even her passion for anthropology kind of gave way as she could see the power that she had and the ways that she could contribute to movements and leadership. And she was very complex. She could talk to you about movement politics and all the minutiae, but she also could talk to you about literature and theater and her passion for music. And I think about how she would joke about the skirts that she had to wear for her talks and her organizing through AFSC, but then she would be so just like powerful in her leather jacket and her motorcycle boots, and she would kind of rebuild those boots every few years. She would tend to her old friends, and literally, like, she would tend to her friendships. Her boots were her friends. And she would remember, like Chris said, like birthdays and little gifts. And I know I'm supposed to be talking about WL. I'm about to get there. It's very, I think more than anything about the calling that she had to do the death penalty work that she did, and how it was almost like a spiritual need, really, to walk with people who were being buried alive in prisons and who were being murdered by the state. And I think a lot about her courage to repeatedly tolerate that bereavement, and then muster the courage again to become friends and to lose friends again that way. And how she guided us to find that courage and to not look away. And so she connected with War Resisters League's history, in particular because of its historical moments of inspiring anti-racist practice, because WRL has some really powerful moments that I think she wanted to preserve in all that archiving and celebrating. And, as an anti-capitalist, she was deeply aware of worker relations, and having a movement job is indeed an invitation to a very complex kind of set of worker relations. And she cared very much about the people who devoted themselves to the work. And she cared enough to not let WRL slide when the organization misstepped or if folks unexamined or unchecked whiteness or privilege caused harm. And she believed in WRL's vision to not relent when it came to the important challenges. She knew 100-year-old organizations have a lot of baggage, and some of it needs to be put down. But like others, she was frustrated with WRL for ways it should have done better by people, doing better by people. And she also had this critique of movements generally. And she had been burned before, and she deeply believed that movements have to become models of the world we want, instead of slipping back into those behaviors that we learn in white supremacist patriarchy. And so she wanted us to care for each other. And as part of our political commitment and our work, that we have to care for each other. Lost my spot, but and in her time at WRL, she did all that she could do to model and to push and to cultivate these things. And this was affirming for many who worked with and for WRL. Organizational change can be slow, but WRL needed Linda and her principled challenges. Linda didn't say anything for a long time about her humble title as office coordinator, but for her entire tenure at WRL, she kept nearly everything moving forward. She managed the national office, physical office with its decades of physical stuff that needed to be moved around and gotten rid of, and also the non-physical, the systems and the work. She kept the literature program vibrant for organizers around the country. She was a master of organization and documentation. She developed systems and ensured the documents and tools were safe and organized and retrievable. She managed conference logistics. She did website development. She worked on the CRM integration. She was a big techie or geek, as she would call herself, and she really, managed all of this. I don't know how. It's just a million hands, it seemed. She did HR work. She did the fundraising support, and she even wrote fundraising letters. She did the big office move, and she had all of these practical and little details always in her mind and always reminding folks. But she did these other big pieces that weren't part of her job. She did a lot of organizational development, the board relationships, the NC relationships, the coordinating of so much of a twice-a-year huge national committee meeting, board elections and budget work on the finance committee, leadership development, cultivating youth and green staff members, the interns. She was the archivist of all archivists. She educated and elevated the historical importance of this work. And though it wasn't officially in her job description, she was a strategist and an organizer first and foremost, and she helped support and challenge and guide program staff. And she emphasized the non-negotiable need to be accessible to all bodies, and she provided moral support and was a sounding board for organizing. And she maintained relationships with supporters and partners, and she brought an ineffable spirit of family and warmth. And her pictures of babies and loved ones filling a whole wall above her desk, and little gifts, even for the cat. She would make sure Rusty had little gifts, and she tolerated and absolutely adored that maniacal cat. And she, who I love too, she brought, and she really was, the heart and soul and the laughter and the music and the kindness in WRL. Not the only, but so much of it for so many years. And so Chris pointed out that she would not want us to miss a chance to do some activating when speaking to a captive audience. And so she would want to remind you all that all of you can and should be doing whatever organizing you can, however you can, and that you can take issues or action on the issues you care about. And if you, like Linda, care really deeply about ending militarism and challenging the poverty draft and stopping the militarization of the police, WRL materials like the pie chart or the counter-recruitment brochures to keep kids from enlisting, they're all there, and she lovingly kept it all at the ready. And you can order and you can give them out, and if recruiters show up at your kids' schools, see if you can get them removed. And if you can't, set up a table to let the kids see the other side of the story. And we will continue. And we love you, Linda. I have to don the other part, which is to introduce Pilar. And I hope that the videos are set up, and I didn't have a chance to check in. So are we good to go with all of that?
Hi, everyone. My name is Pilar. I've been a member with Critical Resistance since New York City chapter first started, 2001, 2000 maybe. And Linda was one of the first faces, people, amazing people that I ever met in that meeting. There was an amazing public meeting, and I showed up like a spring chicken and ready to do some work, and she just made me feel so welcome, so warm. I thought she was so fierce and so cool. I was like, oh my God, I want to get down with these people. Who are they? She's amazing. And she ended up being my mentor, my friend, my sister, an aunt to my daughter. My daughter was about 1 at that point. And and now she's my elder and my ancestor. So I'm here to just highlight some of the things that Linda has done with Critical Resistance. Oh, and this is Woods. Woods is a part of Critical Resistance as well, who's just here for support, like right now. Okay, Linda's roles in CR. Linda was a conference organizer for CR's historic conferences from 1999 to 2008, CR East, CR South, and CR 10, and remained in the organization for years after as a national member based in New York, and more recently was one of CR's community advisors. In each of these roles, Linda connected people cross-locally from local to national and internationally, often through her steadfast communications work and organizing. All of her work and each of her contributions were rooted in care for everyday people with a broad vision of liberation for all. CR Conference Organizer, one of the coordinators of CR's Northeast Regional Conference in 1999 and 2001, and was on the steering committee planning for the conference. The conference seated prison industrial complex abolition as a strategy, geared towards sharing skills to make local organizing against the PIC more effective and prioritizing the participation and leadership of people most impacted by the PIC. This conference helped launch Critical Resistance as an organization just 2 months later. So she supported the conference, organizing for CR South and CR 10 from New York. Linda was also, for Critical Resistance New York City, we had working groups for Through the People. She would do the newsletter. She was the designer. She helped distribute all of those newsletters to prisoners in the East Coast for many years. Linda did all of the technology work for Critical Resistance. She was the backbone of Critical Resistance technology. She is responsible for the websites. She's responsible for anything that any of 10 autonomous chapters had going on technology-wise. She was, as a national member and community advisor of CR, Linda developed monumental abolitionist organizing resources for the organization and movement. She worked on CR's first toolkit, CR Abolition Organizing Toolkit. We worked on that together. Linda spearheaded CR's republication of Instead of Prisons by the Prison Research Education Action Project, 2005. That book is instrumental to the abolition movement. Basically, Quakers, a lot of the Quakers were responsible for that book, I remember that. Linda supported at times, organized on, and mentored members through CR's campaigns and projects, From New York, she supported outreach, media and communications, organizing for CR's Amnesty for Prisoners of Katrina campaign, a campaign based in New Orleans in 2006, advised and guided CR Oakland chapter members in organizing strategy with faith-based communities and churches to defeat gang injunctions in Oakland, California, as well as campaign strategy to defund Urban Shield, the largest war games expo. She supported organizers through multiple generations of CR's New York chapter. She supported the leadership development of formerly imprisoned people, members who are most impacted by the prison industrial complex. Linda attended CR national retreats, building with guiding younger members, regularly shared her wealth of movement history, knowledge, and challenged our organization to sharpen our analysis of prisons and policing as instruments of war and understanding, where am I here? Cell phones are incredible. Where am I? Oh boy. Okay. Linda attended CR national retreats, building with guided younger members, regularly shared her wealth of movement history, knowledge, and challenged our organizations. I said that already. To sharpen, I'll say it again. That's okay, Linda. I know. She's like, just don't worry about those people. It's okay. You're going to be fine. Analysis of prisoners of war. Okay, let's just move on. Linda's warmth, generosity, and grounding ability to welcome organizers into the movement helped make CR a political home for countless members cross-generationally. She always met us where we were at. Linda was non-judgmental. She always loved us. She saw, even if we were, politically not aligned just yet or didn't have an analysis cracked down, she gave us our time. Linda invested in us. She loved us. In the winter of 2021, a few months before her passing, Linda came together with a few other longtime CR members and founders who are now our community advisors. I asked her to please speak to the new members of Critical Resistance because we have a whole new organization of new members. And I needed the new members to learn from her. In that conversation, Linda demonstrated her persistence and resilience as an organizer. Her humor, her love, her light and generosity, her tenacity as a powerhouse of organizer and abolitionist. We'd like to share a few minutes of Linda doing what she does, being the irreplaceable friend and comrade, strategist and visionary that we needed and still do.
Linda Thurston, she, her pronouns, here in Brooklyn, waiting on 12 inches of snow, which in New York is like, oh my God, I grew up in New England. It's called winter. It's really not that big a deal. A foot of snow is nothing. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I come out of 3,000 different organizing movement contexts. And I forget how weird that is until I get in a room with people from completely different areas and I know them all and none of them know each other. In the 70s and the 80s, to a large degree, and perhaps somewhat into the 90s, even in the left, talking about prison abolition, people said you were crazy. It just was not the done. It was like talking about anti-apartheid in the early 70s. And people would be like, Johanna, what? South Africa, who? It just was not part of the discourse. And it was considered part of why are you bothering with that. Similarly with anti-death penalty stuff, but that's partly because it got abolished and then it got unabolished. So finding, as I'm working at all these different organizations, trying to have a paid gig so I can send money home and all the rest of that, I ended up working in American Friends Service Committee. I ended up being the non-Quaker Quaker rep on a whole lot of church groups, which was fascinating. I ended up working at Amnesty International because my friends made me, and I told them, you're not my friends. Why would you do that to me? But the death penalty, the execution numbers had doubled at that point. But just a lot of little threads coming together so that when the conference happened in 98, I was like, thank the goddess, it's actually happening. Let's see what this turns into. So that very shortly into the work organizing Critical Resistance East, I became very sick. And they ended up leading to surgeries and hemorrhaging and a lot of vampire jokes. Linda, do you need anything? Yes, I need blood. Because I was sort of gray, I looked like a corpse. It was a mess. But it changed how I related to the organizing. It changed what I ended up doing at the conference. And it changed my life. And I basically, anybody that didn't know me before I got sick don't really know me because they know me now. But I will say, having grown up in New England, having spent many years in Boston, in a place where disabled folks don't play. Don't be telling me, oh, you could go around back. No, no. This building's not accessible. We're not moving. We're blocking it with our wheelchair. People just didn't play. I was shocked to find out that was not the case everywhere. And it's become a more important sort of piece of my awareness and activism. And you talk about healthcare in prisons. Don't be 65 years old in a wheelchair in prison. There's people I'm mourning right now because they were not taken care of as they became old, as they became disabled for so many reasons. And then there's also people on the outside who slip away from our movements because there's no way to remain part of it if you're having serious health problems, if you are disabled. I want to do an upside on that, which is that when I realized I couldn't make it to meetings and start running around, I ended up getting more engaged with technology, and Eric Appleton and Arif Modani. I was like, I can't get out of bed for more than 5 minutes, but I can sit at this computer and work on the website. And that has become an important part of the work that I do now, being involved with radical techies and other groups because of CR, because it was like, we're going to find a way for you to stay in this. And that made me find a way to stay in it. And now it's like, well, of course, but it wasn't like that back then. And CR may have been a drop in the bucket of that whole awareness and movement, but the difference between the first two conferences and CR10 and after in paying attention to people's health and mental health needs and making things accessible means that when I say we need ASL interpreter, people won't say, why, do you know anybody deaf who's coming to the meeting? You won't get that anymore. And it's an important change for not just for CR, but for revolutionary movements across the board. The question of power, who's got it, who don't got it, I think has been really central to me, because there is a framing of existence that says we are the powerless and we have to find a way to get the power from the people with the power. That is not, in my experience, been an assumption of CR. The assumption is we have power. We have power to take some of that additional power from some of them folks trying to wield it over us, and we need to be about doing that. And the question is, how are we going to do that? And the question tomorrow will be like, okay, that didn't work. How are we going to do it now? Or, oh, that worked really well. How are we going to do it better? The assumption that we will win, the assumption that power relationships and dynamics will change. And there's a lot I don't like. Me and my knees and my back do not like about being 62. But some of the things I like about being 62 is that I realize part of why I believe we will win is because we have. Now, all those wins didn't stick. All those wins weren't complete. Some of them fell apart the minute after we got them. But there is a usefulness, a utility to understanding that some things actually can change, particularly this last year or so when we were surrounded by so many things that were sliding back and turning completely bazonkers. So just the larger question in terms of, or a specific question in terms of, CR campaigns and all that, I'll leave to others. But I just think we need to start with, what do we understand when we say power, and what do we understand about who has it and how that changes?
I just want to thank Critical Resistance so much. It was wonderful getting the chance to see Linda again, and Linda in her Linda-ness. So thank you guys so much. One of the great things about Linda, like she said, was all the weaving of the different parts of her life. Linda's passion was prison abolition, was abolishing the death penalty. A lot of people met her later in life in WRL or in Amnesty, and those things were very important. But at her heart, the work that she was put here to do was to stop the death penalty. The work that she was put here to do was to abolish the prison system. And for a lot of you, I'd like to introduce you to Fran, because Fran knew Linda when she was baby Linda up in Boston. Thank you.
So I told Chris if I had a walk from Boston to here, I would do it on behalf of Sister Linda, hands down, no doubt. So I'll be speaking about Linda in the early 80s. Linda and I first started doing movement work at Community Development, a prisoner-run program at Walpole Maximum Security Prison. Prisoner-run? You know that did not last for more than a few years before the Department of Corruption. Did I say that? Yes, that's what Linda and I refer to it as. Shut it down. They deemed it as a subversive organization, a security threat. And Linda and I were proud of that, except what it meant is that we did not have the same contact with the brothers inside. At the time, Linda was finishing her studies at Harvard. Also in the early 80s, Linda joined me at the prison book program at the Red Bookstore in Cambridge. We sent mostly radical books to people in prison locked up all over the United States. Prison book program continues to be a real force for getting free literature behind the wall, and last year sent over 10,000 books to people in prison. So now, thank you. So now it's been 15 months since Linda's unexpected and tragic death. So I'm asking everyone here and those watching YouTube to think about how Linda continues to live within you. Do you find yourself asking at times, what would Linda do? What would Linda say? Without a doubt, one of Linda's legacy is her sharp light on injustice in all of its forms. So I ask you, how does Linda's wisdom, passion, and activism continue to shine with each one of us, individually and for organizations such as Critical Resistance, War Resisters Leave, and even Prison Book Program, where she left her mark over 40 years ago? Today, we have the opportunity to take books from the back table, and I have selected some books for the Prison Book Program, classics such as The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. We were sending that back in the 80s. More contemporary, Writing on the Wall by Mumia, and Locked Down, Locked Out why prison doesn't work, and how we can do better. There are also buttons with Linda's images that are being distributed, as well as the invitation from WRL, the War Resisters League, to have people participate in the Linda Thurston archival internship. And I'm thinking, Prison Book Program is celebrating their 50th year. We might be in line for that, okay? So Prison Book Program is going to keep Linda alive because we ordered and now have stamps in red with the following message: in loving memory of Linda Thurston's legacy for justice, which will be stamped into every single book that goes out into prisons all over the U.S. So I'd like to end with, long live Linda's legacy, long live Linda's legacy, long live Linda's legacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fran. Thank you. So I would like to introduce Stephen Oliver, Linda's cousin, who's going to participate, I believe with some other cousins, in a reading of the interview that was done with Linda by Matt Meyer. And yeah? Okay.
Hey everyone, it's great to be here. It's great to see everyone, and just have an opportunity to sit with Linda's words and her presence. I work as a college professor, and I often will sit with presentations that people have made and show them to students and ask students to reflect on what they've heard and to draw meaning, take out of what you've heard and try to, embody as much of it as you can. And I have to tell you, I've watched that video that we just watched like 4 or 5 times, and I still can't keep up with everything that she was talking about. And it allowed us to remember, and as Noni and I were looking at this interview and figuring out how we would offer it up as a reading, and watching the video, we were like, man, Linda could talk. The speed with which she spoke, right? If any of you have ever taken a long car drive with Linda did not believe in silence. She filled the space with words, right? And I'm an introverted person. I pride myself on being quiet and kind of stoic. And Linda was not that way. And have any of you ever gone head to head in an argument with Linda? You didn't win, did you? Right? You don't even remember all of what happened, right? And I tried a couple of times. I was like, I'm just going to keep talking because she's going to keep talking and we're just going to keep talking. And, I never did get there. But I will spend, the rest of my life trying to understand the depth of everything that she did and everything that she was about, and all the layers that she pulled together and would offer up to people as if that was just what everybody did, right? Just amazing to sit with that. And I've already said more than I intended to, so.
It's a family trait. I'm Linda's cousin, Noni. And Linda and I actually lived on the same street in Brooklyn, just several blocks apart. But I would just like to briefly say my first time that I can remember meeting Linda, because I'm sure I met her when I was little, I was a teenager at one of our infamous family reunions. And I, at the time, was a sullen, very sullen teenager, because I didn't want to be there. And Linda kind of circled me, and she left me alone for the most part after a few attempts to talk to me. But one thing I did notice is, because you couldn't ignore Linda, because she had the loudest voice in the room always, she talked to everyone, I noticed. She seemed to be having such a great time at this event that I was so miserable at. She talked to the little kids. She tried to talk to the sullen teenagers. She talked to the middle-aged mom and dads. She talked to the senior citizens in our family. And she seemed to really enjoy and take in their energy and reciprocate with them. And that is the most special talent I think that she had. Like Stephen, I'm an introvert and I'm pretty quiet. So I just remember being stunned. I was like, who is this person? How are we related? Which, if you know how large our family is, it's like a crazy map of how we're related. So yeah, I just wanted to say that briefly. And also, would just like to note that when we were cleaning out Linda's apartment, by far, the person she had the most pictures of was this one right here. Clearly one of her favorites. Stephen at 12, Stephen at 16, Stephen at 20, Stephen at 30. I was like, does she know she has other cousins? It's all that one. But it was appropriate. She had so much love, and even though Stephen was one of her favorites, she still made me feel very special and very loved by her. And like Christine said, it was so wonderful to see her again up on the screen and to hear her voice. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I saw it. And I really wish she was still here. I had a long, horrible cab ride here. But the whole time, I just kept thinking about her and wishing I didn't have to come here today. Not because I was sad, but just because I wish there was no reason for us to gather. I wish she was still here. I wish that we were here for, I don't know, a WRL regular meeting or something, and she was speaking. So yeah, so again, I have gone on longer than I intended, but it's okay. You know, it happens. So, but Stephen and I would like to read a bit of this interview that Linda did with Matt Meyer, and hopefully we can do it some justice, because of course there's, as you saw, nothing like when Linda spoke her own words herself.
So you have a long history of working not just for political prisoners, but for the rights and freedom of prisoners in general, as well as for prison abolition. You've worked with a number of the key regional and national organizations in this field. Would you share some of those experiences?
When I became the director of the New England Criminal Justice Program of the Quaker-based American Friends Service, one of the big issues was a tendency to lock any prisoners who spoke out on any issues in solitary confinement, sometimes for years. These were clear cases of political repression, locking people up not because they posed any threats, but because they were willing to fight for their rights, even as prisoners. Many folks whom I worked with then may not have landed in prison because of political activities, but they certainly got politicized once in prison. Partly because I was in Boston, where there was a very strong anti-apartheid movement and a very strong Central American solidarity movement, I learned about many people doing time because of refusal to cooperate with federal grand jury investigations. At the Red Bookstore in Cambridge, I remember meeting some people like Tommy Manning and Jan Lahman of the Ohio 7 case, who are still political prisoners to this day. Kazi Touré, now out of prison and the national co-chair of the Jericho Amnesty Movement, was around in those days, along with his brother, Arnie King, who is also still doing time despite an incredible record of community support and work. I think there are some regional cultural differences that have shaped people's political development differently. In New York City, for example, most of the political prisoners came directly out of the local Black Panther Party. But in Boston and later in Philadelphia, with the case of MOVE and the MOVE 9, I had a different framework. While I was working for AFSC, I began to learn more about political prisoners through my own writing and radio projects. As an AFSC staff person, I was involved in the 200 Years of Penitentiary project, recognizing Philadelphia's Walnut Street Jail as the first prison in the USA. The campaign was a way of doing prison abolition work in the 1980s, and I got to dress up in my Sunday best and speak to all the Quaker groups and Methodists and Presbyterians and United Church folks. From there, I got to work with the National Interreligious Task Force on Criminal Justice. Those networks, with people like Episcopal Minister S. Michael Yasutake, founding chair of the Prisoner of Conscience Project, building bridges between social and political prisoners, helped create lasting relationships and commitments. Fast forward some years to the early 1990s, and I ended up working with Amnesty International USA on death penalty issues. I actually had, from the beginning, some very real issues with Amnesty International. In part, this was because Amnesty refused to name Nelson Mandela or any number of other people as political prisoners. I didn't understand at that moment the human rights movement's nuanced differences in definition regarding political prisoners, prisoners of war, and prisoners of conscience. Nor did I understand how amazingly egg-headedly legalistic and academicistic the whole human rights framework could be. But at that particular moment, between 1994 and 1995, executions in the USA had almost doubled in 1 year. It seemed important to do that work with those resources, but it was one of the most frustrating experiences of my life. Amnesty is an organization that grows out of the Cold War mentality. They began as a group that issued bulletins on behalf of prisoners of conscience, one prisoner from the West and one from the Soviet Union, trying to embarrass those governments by bombarding them with letters. While I was there, we did begin trying to get Amnesty to pay attention to the case of Black Panther death row inmate Mumia Abu-Jamal, but I could not stay at Amnesty for long. The job I had at the Center for Constitutional Rights was coordinator of the Ella Baker student program, which I used to refer to as my job of training little baby radical lawyers. These were young people that we would recruit from various law schools who thought that they wanted to be movement lawyers. Whatever issues they were eventually going to work on, it was crucial that they get an education in the history and the current way of looking at the role of prisons in society and the reality of political prisoners. I remember bringing in Attica Prison Rebellion survivor and Representative Big Black in to come and talk to these law students after we'd shown them the film Attica. It was a strong way of educating and radicalizing people who could have a direct effect on the lives of prisoners.
You've been active since the beginning in the development of critical resistance, which in some ways tries to present a new framework about how to do some of this work. And you continue to help bridge the gap between work around prison abolition and around political prisoners. Could you describe the current national scene around the time of the 10th anniversary of CR and discuss how things have changed and how they've stayed the same?
It may be a new framework and a new concept in this current iteration, but the notion of prison abolition is much older than the 1998 founding conference of CR. I actually didn't get involved in CR until after that initial national conference in Oakland, but I did attend the conference. There were many folks at the first critical resistance gathering who were overjoyed that people were talking about prison abolition again. We didn't know that over 1,000 people would show up with energy to build local and regional chapters. We clearly hit upon a moment when people were ready to work on issues involving the role of prisons in U.S. life. One issue that we've been dealing with and need to continue to deal with is the role of people who have been most impacted by the prison industrial complex. Our organizations can't just be made up of people who want to work on an issue. It has to include people who did time, people whose family members have done time. These folks must be in the leadership of the movement and the leadership of the struggle because in many ways they can best understand and convey the complexities of the system on a local and national level. As we all need to step up and become active when that's needed, we also need to learn to step back and take leadership from the folks who haven't been in leadership. Some of us older folks need to learn that in regard to the youth, too. Another thing that's fairly unique about CR, in my experience, is the way in which the regional organizations reflect the national program as well as the specific political context in a given region of the country. We've been weaving a sort of web between the local networks and the national group. There's also a great deal of attention in CR given to political education. Far too often in our movements, we don't find out where people are coming from. If somebody shows up for a meeting, we're so glad that they're there, we'll just give them some things to do and tell them when and where to go for the next meeting. But CR really works to build community. I feel very connected to the local folks in the organization. Even though I work more with the national, we are in a situation where someone can put a call out and say, yo, the sister who was at the meeting last night, her kid just got arrested. Can any of you get to court? And people do it. It reminds me of working with the groups in Boston when I was younger, that sense of community, of family, of connectedness. That feeling also comes up when I get emails from different political prisoner support groups saying, so-and-so on the inside is sick. We've got to jump in here and deal with this. I guess I've come full circle after all these years, realizing that we need the political analysis, we need the political education, we need the strategizing, we need more bodies, and we need resources. But we also damn sure better remember that we're human beings, and we need to support one another on all levels, or we're not going to make it. Sometimes our failure is as simple as calling a meeting at dinner time and not having so much as a pitcher of water at the table. If we're going to survive, if we're going to succeed, if we're going to win, if we're going to free folks, we've got to get better at doing the human piece of building movement by building community.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to give an update. So Arnie King was mentioned in the interview, and Arnie has been out now for 2.5 years. He was doing a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And maybe one of the only few things that was good about COVID is that a number of lifers ended up getting out, and Arnie was one of them.
Fran, Linda would love that. She was always like finding the silver lining in the cloud. If you know Linda, you know she loved our family. And we have these infamous, amazing, crazy family reunions. And one of the last family reunions Linda attended, a bunch of my cousins got together and started singing. And she talked about that for years. So today I'd like to introduce you to one of my cousins, Roger Oliver, who is amazing, who was one of those cousins singing. So you get a little chance to have a family reunion with us.
You don't mind if I get up all up on y'all, do you? All right, that works. And this works. All right, thank you very much. Before I get going here, a few words. I love the fact that you have that one picture of Linda doing the Vulcan salute right after the picture of her with the power salute, because as Noni would tell you, and Christine would tell you, my brothers would tell you, we were some nerdy kids. And Linda was our oldest. Linda's my first cousin. She's the oldest cousin. And Jay, I'm not leaving you out too. Jay, OG nerds here. They were the original. Before there was such a thing as a blurred or black nerd, we were some OG blurds over here. And I have to tell you, when Linda came back from her trip to Sudan, she came back with some fire. And she was telling it to us, and she would tell us all this stuff and tell us all this. She told us stuff about, black struggle and black history, like she was talking to white people. Now, we're a black family here. You look around our house, there were like all the conga drums and masks and bells and shaker-rays and dashikis. I'm like, why is she telling us all this stuff like this? Which is a funny thing because in a way, like, Linda, she knew we knew. She knew we knew, but it wasn't enough that we knew. She wanted to make sure we knew. Sure, you know, but do you know? She wanted to make sure we knew. And so she was an activist and and someone who you can imagine. The first thing I thought when Roe was overturned is like, what in the world Linda would have said, right? And so I looked up the definition of protest this morning. A statement or action expressing disapproval or objection to something, right? A statement or action expressing disapproval or objection to something. In other words, oh, no, you didn't. And the funny thing about Linda coming back full of that fire like that, that is what is required to be an activist. If you're going to protest, you've got to be a zealot. You have to be on fire. It is not a casual thing. You think about John Brown, zealot, half out of his mind, maybe fully out of his mind, but on fire. Because it is not a casual thing. It is not a one-day thing. It is every day. And people who are protesting are out there on the picket lines or wherever they are every day, in the cold, in the rain, with or without food, every day, standing in the breach. And that's who you need standing in the breach are the Lindas of the world. And so we're going to have a little protest song here. Y'all don't mind making a little noise, do you? All right. Let's make some noise. Sorry, y'all. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Unions are behind us. We shall not be moved. The unions are behind us. We shall not be moved, just like a tree
is planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Fighting for our children. Fighting for our children. We shall not be moved. Fighting for our children. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Marching for our freedom, we shall not be moved. Marching for our freedom, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Come on, sing it. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. The unions are behind us, we shall not be moved. The unions are behind us, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved. Black and white together, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Yeah, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved.
Forgot my job because I was just really moved by your beautiful voice, Roger. So I want to introduce Kazembe Balagoon, who's on a video and an old comrade from the Student Liberation Action mobilization at Hunter. So he met Linda when all of those actions were being planned for Mumia 20 some odd years ago, more than 20 years ago. So welcome, Kazembe, from wherever you're coming from.
Hello, y'all. To everyone gathered here today, to my comrades, to my friends. The word meaning is derived from the word mourning or moaning. Today, I'm in search of meaning through the mourning and the moaning of the loss of my dear sister, Linda Thurston. I knew Linda as a comrade, as a colleague, as a confidant. First, as a member of Critical Resistance, later as a staff member at the Breck Forum, but always as someone who I can come and have a conversation with, to find solace with, to find joy with. Linda was an incredibly gifted and smart, brilliant human being whose acumen in terms of building an organizational culture and philosophy of leadership has left us with a number of gifts that we continue to build on. Oftentimes when I think about Linda, I think about her own poise, the flick of her hair, particularly those long dreadlocks, the timbre of her voice, the way that she kind of drew you into a conversation on the side. As a young radical, she would oftentimes sit down with me and give me some tremendous piece of information or news. And you know Linda, she would never sugarcoat it at all. She would give it to you 125%. Oftentimes, in my haste or in my pink cloudedness, I would just say to Linda, I was like, how can you even say something like that? How is that even possible? But Linda was not trying to discourage me from what I needed to do. But she was actually providing a road and an idea of what needed to be done. And that's really at the core of Linda's prophetic vision. It wasn't necessarily very much clouded in a mysticism, but in a very smart way of understanding of the word that the people needed at the time. What are the truths that we need right now? Linda has left us with a number of different truths that we, as our comrades, will continue to activate in the coming years during our difficult times. But for this moment right now, I just always want to remember Linda. And it's difficult for me even to say that because I always think about Linda in the now sense, in the future sense. So Linda is here. She'll continue to be activated. She'll continue to be in our midst, in our presence. My love goes out to her family and to all of us as we continue this work.
Pardon me, I haven't worn high heels in 2 years. One of the things that we've been talking about a lot is Linda's family and how important she was to our family and how important family was to her. But family doesn't just include biological family. Her activist family was equally important. In some ways, this feels like another family reunion. I've been fortunate enough to not only be a biological cousin of Linda's, but I've also worked with Linda in movement work. So I know the importance of her activist family. And I actually want to take a moment now to give a round of applause to her activist family because all of this is the hours of work that everyone put in. And I'd like to introduce another member of that family. Carla's going to be reading some writing from Linda.
My tears are of joy and blessing that Linda was my friend. I really feel blessed that I got to be with Linda. As many times as I got to be with her during War Resisters League. As she said, my name is Carla Dawson. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. I came to the War Resisters League for 10 or 12 years. I was on the national committee. And when Linda came to War Resisters League and I saw her, my soul was joyful. As you can see, I'm a black woman. There's not a lot of black women in the peace movement. But when I saw Linda, I knew my soul was kindred. I knew we were in the struggle, and we were going to stay in the struggle. So in my soul, I am a Catholic worker. I've been a Catholic worker more than half my adult life, 34 years, which is a long time in the Catholic worker. Just saying. So I believe that every person has a calling. And if you live out your calling, that's all that God asks of you. Some of us don't know what our calling is. Some of us, God keeps calling us until we answer, and then we know. So these are Linda's words that I get to read, and I am also thankful about that too. This is from a 1996 interview by Renee Russo. Linda Thurston on human rights advocacy, a lifelong automatic reaction. Linda Thurston recalls, one of my first memories is of police mistreating people in the completely black community where I grew up in Rhode Island. I saw racism firsthand and started helping juveniles as a volunteer. Reflecting on this automatic reaction that led her to work against the death penalty. Some of the people who are now more active against the death penalty, Linda added, were not at first. She describes how important it is to question and talk openly to people about the death penalty. Will you meet young people who say, I've never heard of anyone who was against the death penalty. I've never thought about it. We have a saying in the U.S., she states, that support for the death penalty is a mile wide, but an inch deep. She explains that a lot of people believe that the death penalty in the U.S. is mandatory, but that judges are not obliged to give the death penalty. In this country, judges and prosecutors are elected. So there are political reasons for the death penalty, and in cases, a pattern of racial discrimination. Linda's warmth and passion carry the message of hope that it is possible to have an impact. More and more young people are joining the fight against the death penalty. Some states have agreed not to kill juveniles, and others, like Michigan or Rhode Island, have not reinstated the death penalty. She admits to being really stubborn and shows a determination that moves mountains. You have to be persistent. There was a time when people thought there would never be an end to slavery. If someone had said that it would be abolished 45 years later, people would have thought they were crazy. But there were enough people who kept believing. In 1996, Linda wrote, "Stopping the prison industrial juggernaut" for War Resisters League magazine, The Nonviolent Activist. When the Nonviolent Activist asked me to write about last fall's Critical Resistance Conference, it came to me that even without the parallels between the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex, even without the large number of nonviolent activist readers who had been imprisoned, the subject has relevance for the peace activists who read this magazine. We are not only people working to end war and militarism, but people working to end violence. The violence of stun guns and long-term isolation cells, and communities with 40% of the youthful population in prison. The violence of local economies, forced to beg for a prison in order for people to have jobs. The violence of rapist prison guards and racist courts, and 11-year-old children in high-security prisons. All of that is part of our struggle. Thank you.
I can't believe how much love and support has come to us, our friends and family. We want to thank you all again for coming out and sharing some time with Linda and with us. One of Linda's friends said the first thing she ever said to Linda was, "Mary, we meet." It's an old earthbound tradition, a Wiccan tradition. You say, "Mary, we meet, Mary, we part, and Mary, we meet again." So to all of you, I wish Mary, we meet, Mary, we part, and Mary, we meet again.